engineering. Let's just call it that, because they probably did where we don't. Anyway, so that was an interesting bit of stuff there about the Vedic math. I'm still pursuing some of the more combinoric formulas that are indicated in the larger patterns that are expressed in the sutras themselves. So in other words, all the sutras could be numbered in a particular series. And if you started off with and just decided, isn't it interesting that the those that we have artificially or arbitrarily labeled odd or even, so we could start at 1 as opposed to 0 and say 1, 2, 3, and so 1 and 3 share certain characteristics in terms of the underlying sutras themselves and what they're focused on, whereas 2 and 4 also share certain characteristics that are different from 1 and 3. And therefore, wouldn't it be interesting to take 1 and 3 and combine them into a longer sutra and see what you get? And you do get some very interesting stuff there. So I'm still pursuing that. That's going to be a long bit of work because there's a lot of math involved there. Okay, so let's get some in-our-face kind of stuff here. As applied to the Vedic math was an offshoot of looking at some of the stuff from Dr. Bhat's understanding of the solar system. So we don't orbit our sun. We're dragged behind our sun. Our sun is a comet. All things in universe in our solar or in our material universe are basically behaving as comets. Galaxies, even when they move through space, are basically cometary in terms of how they move. So we are following all the planets are trailing behind our sun as we zip along in space. We don't ever come even near the equatorial plane of the sun. All the software you have that shows any of the astrological or astronomical alignments that show planets aligning relative to a heliocentric, that is the sun in the middle of all of us, model, those are all wrong. They in no way are accurate. We can prove this is the case because if that were true, and we were at the equatorial plane of the sun, we would only be able to see any given outer planet, that is to say, any planet further out from the sun than ourselves would only be able to be viewed from Earth no more than 33 days a year because of the occlusion of the reflection of the light by the sun itself, as well as our position, and then the fact that the sun would be between us and those outer planets. Now note, we can see all the outer planets continuously. They're always viewable by us from some spot on the Earth. We never have the sun between ourselves and any other planet. We never see the Mercury go around the sun and disappear. We see instead this weird retrograde behavior, they call it. So anyway, Dr. Bhat is quite correct. Anybody that conceives of us as a heliocentric, that is to say, sun in the middle model of a solar system, they're full of it. You can just disregard their math from that point on. They may have some interesting things to say nonetheless, but if you're relying on their mathematics and so on to guide you through the solar system, you're going to be screwed because it doesn't operate that way. So as a result of investigating Dr. Bhat's model for some further clues, and then also going into some of these Vedic math sutras, I've come to certain conclusions that seem indicated. These conclusions include the idea that we are about or in the process of doing a transition that Dr. Bhat references as a shift in a conical section. So if we think of the sun as a comet dragging us all through space, we're not all in a straight line behind it. All of our planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, etc., we all have a place in what is basically a cone that's being dragged behind the sun. The bigger the planet, the further out from the sun, because it takes more energy to drag the bugger. And it thus has more freedom to wobble about on its own because the sun is exerting less and less influence on it electromagnetically or gravitationally. And so they will have a larger, let's put quotes around this word, orbit. and so the orbit of some of the larger gas planets and further out planets is much longer than our Earth orbit. Well, guess what, guys? Earth used to have different orbits. We know that at one point the planet had an orbit that was 360 days, almost 360 days in length. We're now at 365.24, blah, 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 blah. The Mayans knew better than us. But if we just basically 365 and a quarter days. So we've shifted out 5 and a quarter days from what our previous orbital path was. And then we also find, geez, it turns out that before that, our orbit was not 360 days. It was actually 351.3 days. And prior to that, it was 333.3 days, which probably is at the period of time that the Egyptian mystery schools got all whipped up and put into place, because that it may also be coincident with the destruction of the 5th planet in the solar system, whatever the hell we wanted to call it, Marduk or Bob or Sid or something, that now forms the orbiting asteroid belt. The asteroid belt is, in fact, doesn't orbit around the sun. It's not spread out in this long, thin line like a ring around the sun, the same way we have a ring around Saturn, but in fact is this area of debris that is behind us, so to speak, that can be disturbed, and bits and pieces of it can be sent directly at us. So it is within a conical section one step further out than Mars. And these conical sections are able to be analyzed with all forms of mathematics that relate to cones and other polygonal shapes of the Pythagorean solids. So in any event, here we are, we've got this cone, and we discovered that, geez, our position within the cone basically determines our, quote, orbit, unquote. Now, this is the period of time that we rotate from one point within our conical section back to that same point that we traverse, not rotate, excuse me. It's been a long week. Anyway, so within Dr. Bhat's understanding and within his math, buried some very interesting premises. One is that we go through a periodic change, which the Mayans have pegged. Then that periodic change actually includes the sun shoving our ass further away from it. And thus, when we get shoved further away from it, as is occurring right at this point, all of our weather changes, our entire biosphere changes, and indeed our orbit changes. So look for a longer year to start showing up, guys. We're going to be shoved further out from the sun here as part of this process that the sun is undergoing. This is not an unnatural process. It repeats. It just so happens that we're all really lucky bastards, and we get to live at this period of time when the sun's going to cause all of the planets to go truck about in their conical section as it experiences some of these issues that it undergoes. And we needn't go there at the moment. Some of these conical section shifts are what are causing all of the earthquakes that Patrick Garrell and others are able to predict. This is also, by the way, what causes the expansion. If you think of the planet, if you think of ourselves as being restricted within the section of the cone that we can go around as we're drugged behind the sun, that section of the cone actually forms a specific harmonic that restricts the size of Earth. So we get all of these inputs from the sun, and the Earth has to grow because it's creating new matter like mad, creating all this oil, hydrocarbons, gases, hydrogen, and so on, deep in its internal core, and it's pumping them straight out towards us through the mantle. But it can't expand because it is restricted by the conical section through which it travels. In order for it to expand, it must get to a larger conical section. So in that sense, we're on our way to growing to becoming like Saturn. Now, probably none of us will ever be alive when the Earth gets around to being as big as Saturn, if it ever does. But we are in the process of shifting out that direction. And we are in the process of growing. These two are simultaneous, the shift and the growth. They're complements, conjunctions, and partners of each other's actions, interdependent, but neither causal of the other, simply coincident. The impacts for us, of course, could be a whole new planet and a whole new orbital year, whole new seasons, whole new growing areas, radical environment, change all over, as well as going through this period of transition. We have increased energies from space, which increase in mutation, kill off all different kinds of life forms that aren't prepared to go to the next stage, and so on. And thus we have a true ending of one age and the beginning of another age of our planet. It is as though our planet is growing and has had a birthday and is about to enter into a new phase of its life. Because it's actually going to grow. It's going to be a new kid and change itself. And us lucky guys are going to live there and watch all of this. It may be that this change will not favor humans. I doubt that simply because we're still here. In other words, we've been through a lot of shit with this planet, and we've gone through these phases and growth periods again and again, and we as a species have managed to continue to pull our fat out of the fire and go on to the next phase. It may be that it is our destiny as individuals living in this phase to work out ways that we can help our species survive into the next phase. So it just may be, I don't know. And, it's one of those destiny things. Anyway, so Dr. Bhat's model here of our conical section and our planes also ties into the Vedic math and the time pathing, and probably ties into these people screwing around with our timelines as well. But anyway, Dr. Bhat's model, when applied with the Vedic math in this particular set of sutras that I think may apply, and I may be really wildly wrong based on screwy brain matter at the time, but nonetheless, it would appear that this coming year, 2013, we'll see a reaction in the sun that will be extremely atypical, and that it, to our thinking, may actually, or to our perception, may actually look like a pulsing. This pulsing may also be felt or perceived magnetically, gravitationally. So, as an instance, we may see the sun temporarily, or as part of the repulsive push of putting all of our planets into our new conical plane, may temporarily draw us in, or appear to. That appearing to may be a function of the sun itself actually expanding. We wouldn't be able to tell. That's our problem. From our perspective, if it grows larger, is it nearer or simply larger? We cannot really tell and won't be able to during the brief period that this will occur. But thereafter, we would be further out. We'd have a larger orbit. My calculations are showing on the order of 16 to 18 days. But that's making an assumption. No, that's making a shitload of assumptions, none of which do I have any right to do. However, I've applied some of the math, and it would seem that we would fall into slightly less than 16 days period increase if I've applied the math correctly. The arithmetic is real straightforward and simple. The application of the formula is questionable. So anyway, but nonetheless, it would be a significant increase and would cause all kinds of warming issues and climate change and all the crap we're going through now, only on a much more permanent basis. But would actually, once we've actually accomplished this shift, things are going to settle down fairly rapidly, and we can view it from Dr. Bhat's model fairly effectively. It is as though that the sun was like a vacuum cleaner that had been put on reverse. You used to see these in commercials all the time when they would do this, and they would put a ping pong ball or a bowling ball or something up in the flow of the vacuum, and it would sit there and hover an inch or two off of the snout of the nozzle, and then they would turn off the electricity, and the thing would instantly react, but there was a slight hesitation, and you could actually see it start to fall and so on. As the electricity shuts down and the whole machine winds down, there's this slight hesitation. But it does happen very rapidly. And that's probably what we're going to see here, is that as the repulsive force from the sun pushes all the planets into their new conical section, and may even birth another planet based on other idea, which would take the position of what we now think of as Mercury, or actually would be between Mercury and the sun, and Mercury would be kicked out a significant portion from its orbit, or its conical section. In any event, once the mechanism has happened and Earth has been pushed out, Earth will resist, so to speak, the pushing force, and the force will expend itself fairly rapidly once we're in that new position, stasis or an equilibrium should return much more rapidly than the time period it took for the disturbances themselves to occur. So all of my life we've been living in this period of disturbance, and I think realistically we could look from about 1830 was the beginning of this transition into where